everyone, I'm Rosanna, and this is AFL Obsessed. I am so excited to introduce a very special guest to the pod, someone I look up to and who was also our very first Spotlight segment back in episode 6, My Australian Dream. And I'm always excited to have another American perspective on the game. And this time we have a truly unique one. I'd like to welcome Richmond President Peggy O'Neal. So welcome, Peggy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. Always happy to hear that people are following the sport in the U.S.
How are you? It's so exciting that AFLW is ongoing and the AFL season is just around the corner. I mean, how are you feeling about the season and the year ahead?
Well, our AFLW team had their first win on Friday night, and this is their second season in the competition. So it was very exciting, very historic to have our women record their first win for points, as they say. So a lot of happiness and celebration around that. The men had a practice match on Friday, and just seeing some of the new guys, the younger guys who hadn't had a chance to play last year with hubs and that sort of thing. And we had a pretty good team that we put together last year. So it was fun to watch them. And we have a full-blown practice match against Collingwood on Friday night, again, in part of the preseason. And 18th of March, whole season kicks off for the men, and the women will still be playing. It'll overlap this year for the first time. And we hope that the women get a complete season, because last year it was called due to COVID and there wasn't a winner, a premier announced for that season. So anyway, we're all excited. The idea that we're having crowds back. We're going to allow 50,000 people, which is pretty amazing, on the 18th of March. And the other big thing we get to do that day is to unfurl our 2 premiership flags in front of all of them. Yeah, because last year we didn't have crowds at the first game. And so we said, we'll just hold everything over until we can get a lot of our fans back. So if things stay the way they are with the virus here, we should be able to get 50,000 in, which is a great accomplishment.
That's so exciting. I know we were all really disappointed last season with the abbreviated AFLW season. So hopefully, this season, everything will go a little bit more smoothly. There is a great interview that you did with Donnie Hess for the Fourth and Long pod, where you talked about your whole journey from West Virginia to Richmond on the other side of the world. So everyone should check that out. Definitely listen if you haven't. I am interested in the fact that you have always been interested in sports. It's practically in your DNA. And you talked about playing gridiron exhibition matches with your intramural teams, and you were always the quarterback. So did you immediately become interested in Aussie rules? I mean, what drew you to the game? What was your maybe first exposure to Aussie rules and your initial impressions, if you don't mind sharing with listeners?
Well, when I moved to Australia, it was August of '89, and that was, as I now know, toward the end of the football season. And the finals in September, the grand final came around. I thought, well, what's this? It didn't feel like Super Bowl, because that's what I was familiar with, and the hype and that sort of thing. But I thought, I looked out on the street on the Saturday, where's everybody gone? And it's like everybody's at the game or everybody's watching the game. And so that ended up being one of those classic matches. And I can't say I understood watching on television exactly everything that was going on, but I knew it was significant. And then I started to become aware of everybody in Melbourne has a team. And because I like sport, I thought, this looks kind of interesting. And I went to my first game, probably 1992 or 93. And I'd listened to it on the radio, or they weren't all televised back then. And I thought, this sounds exciting. I wonder what it would be like in person. So a friend of mine said, my wife is a Richmond supporter. And I was living in Richmond. So I thought, well, they'll be my team, because that's the name of my suburb. I'll go with them. And so I went with her, and it was a beautiful autumn afternoon, and I remember Richmond lost to Melbourne, but the ground was so big and it was so exciting, and you didn't need to know all the rules to get caught up in just the athleticism of what you were witnessing. So I took to it right away. I can't say that I went to every game from day one, but little by little, I got more and more involved, and it became a real priority to be at the games on Saturdays most often back then. And I started arranging work so that I would be free to go to games. And then I thought, now I'll go interstate and see some of those games. And so I just got hooked because it is a really wonderful sport to watch.
I love how that just kind of gradually became something.
Yeah, sucked me into into becoming a crazy Richmond fan, as they say.
Well, I hope you won't hold it against me that I'm an Essendon member. Hopefully you'll still continue this.
No, we always need people on. We need people on the other side, or there wouldn't be a competition.
That's so true. So one of the most magical and emotional experiences that I've had in sport is attending the Anzac Day Eve and Anzac Day games. And I went in 2019. And the games themselves, obviously, but just actually walking to the G before the game. I know you live within walking distance, when everyone has their scarves on, and just that excitement and the level of excitement I really haven't seen here. It's just such a special feeling when you're walking there. And do you feel the same sense of exhilaration now as you did when you initially started watching?
I do. If anything, it's probably even heightened because I know how much the game means to so many of those people, and to me too. But I feel a real responsibility in being president and thinking when you see people with the scarf on with Richmond colors, I think I have a responsibility to make sure this club keeps going and that it's sustainable for the future. There's something about a real community and neighborhood feel, and of seeing people with scarves on and people with opposite teams who walk together. And so it's sort of accepted that, as I said before, everybody has a team, but it doesn't mean you dislike one another. It just means that for historic reasons, or your family was this or that you have another team. So it's a wonderful feeling. And I still get, butterflies, besides the fact teams playing, but butterflies walking there and just seeing families together and hand in hand. And it's just such a tradition, and as the game grows, more and more people can go. And it was really one of the sad parts of last year, besides it being the virus, that that rhythm of going to the game and what you do, and it was taken away, and no one in Victoria saw a game live last year. I didn't see a game live last year. So you start to think, well, maybe now that it's taken away, you really miss it a lot more. And watching on television was, fine. But and it was great the sport continued here, but it was not the same as walking with your friends, sitting in the stands, and just seeing all the colors around the stadium. So hopefully that will return. But no, I still get the same exhilaration of going to games as I always had, because it all goes back to loving the game.
That's so true. I agree with you too about just the game continuing and the sport continuing, especially for, as you probably saw, sport-starved Americans, because we were at an impasse with our sports. And so a lot of Americans were kind of tuning in. But going back to first when you got to Australia back in 1989, I mean, did you miss anything from the U.S. initially after your move there?
Oh, I missed a lot of things. I missed 24-hour shopping. And even though I was from small towns, I thought I missed the kinds of brands of food that you're used to, and you're trying to say, well, what is the thing that's similar? So I think right away you lose a bit of confidence in, you knew how to do things, and then you move to another country and you're trying to figure out how to do things. I missed my family, of course, my friends. When I moved here, there was a postal strike on, and I was thinking, oh, this would never happen in America. That doesn't happen so much anymore. But it was just getting used to a whole new culture. And from sport, I missed gridiron. I like basketball. I miss that. I miss the whole college level sports, which, is what most Americans end up following, because you aren't in a city that has a professional team. So I miss not having ready access to watching the University of Virginia play basketball, for example, and Virginia Tech play football. So just those little things. Then over time, when you get more involved in where you are than where you left, you might feel it, but the whole starts to fill in a little bit with the new things that you're doing and the new people that you're meeting. And so now I miss America when I'm here, and when I'm there, I miss Australia. So, but I don't know when I'll get back there, just given the restrictions on international travel.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I'm always interested in the cultural differences too. And I also actually wondered if you did keep up with your alma maters. Like March Madness is such a big thing here. So I wondered if you were still following them. So you became a member of Richmond pretty shortly after you saw a game, I imagined. And so how did you transition from being a member to becoming a board member?
Well, I'm a lawyer by training, and I became a partner in one of the big law firms here. And because I liked football as well, I was a member, and I was continuing down that way. But as I met more people around the club, people identified that perhaps I could give some free legal advice from time to time to the club. And so I was asked if I would help put together, the sort of constitution and bylaws for a new fundraiser coterie. They call them coteries here, but it's a group. And so I helped with that and met a lot of people. And then sort of out of the blue, I was contacted by someone in administration at the football club that I didn't know him. And I thought, oh, they wanted some more free legal advice or money or something. But he said, oh, there's going to be a vacancy on the board, and we're determined to have it filled by a woman. Would you be interested? And so I had to get permission from my law firm, and they said, well, yes, you can, if certain restrictions. But and then I had to decide whether I was going to take on the job. That was 2005, and Richmond was in a really dire financial situation, and we hadn't won in so long, and it wasn't going to be fun for a very long time. But I thought, well, I speak to boards a lot. I know about governance. I sort of know how to structure things, and maybe that'll be what I can contribute. And so I joined the board in November of 2005, and then I was they call sponsoring a player, which really just means you get better seats. And so I knew a few people around the club, but I really didn't know anybody on the board when I joined.
Wow.
So it was sort of organic. It wasn't quite that linear, but it was years of just going to games and being a fan and understanding a bit more about the game. And I did become interested in the business of football. Like, how do you make money here, and how come Richmond can't make any? and what are the decisions, and how's the system, and salary caps and all that sort of thing. So anyway, I joined the board in 2005, and 2013 became president. So the board has the job of electing the president, and they elected me.
Oh my gosh. Well, actually, you became the first female president of an AFL club, which, I mean, you've been treading new ground as a female leader. And as a female leader, I guess, what has been the most maybe significant barrier in your career, if you wouldn't mind sharing?
Well, in the legal side of things and the sports side of things, I say that the law and sport have a lot in common. There aren't a lot of women in senior ranks of either. So you sort of get used to, as a senior lawyer, being the only woman in the room negotiating things and working with clients. And so as a barrier, I found, in a way, on the law side of things, that I found that coming and having to start all over really made me a much better lawyer. So I didn't see that as a barricade. There was a period, like I mentioned before, about building your confidence up again so that you sort of feel that you know the ropes and you can make a contribution. On the sports side of things, I think it says something about Richmond that in 2005, they wanted a woman on the board. Some clubs, I think there were about, 4 or 5 clubs that by then had a woman on the board, a woman. And then some went backwards, some added women after that. So I thought that Richmond showed it was trying to be progressive, but then, of course, there's a big gap between putting a woman in a job and providing the support and the change that needs to be made to allow that person to contribute and to do a good job. So I, looking back on it, found that it was the assumption around the club was that I knew all the same things that the men knew, even though I was from another country and I was a woman, and it wasn't like I was excluded. It was nobody thought of me as needing any particular help, and I remember early on, after the games were over, there's the rooms where the families all gather and the players, and they go and have the showers in another room and then they leave from there. And they said it was especially important after losses for us to be seen there, that we're supporting them, and we were losing a lot. But I didn't know where the rooms were, and I thought, I haven't stood outside those waiting on autographs all my life like a lot of the men have. So I found that being willing to ask for help, and people were very willing to give it, but it was the first time that I thought, gee, will this be seen as a sign of weakness, or that they'll think they made a wrong decision? And I'll look back on it, and I think these were all just little add-ons. This wasn't the core job, and obviously I understood that, and they were quite open to suggestions, and we ended up with besides people helping find out where the change rooms were, we ended up with probably, I think early on, the best sort of governance structure in the AFL. So I can't think of anything that was a real blocker. But sometimes I still get frustrated that gender is regarded as a reason to not advance people, but it still happens all the time. And this, bias against women achieving roles that they could fill. But as we know, sometimes somebody has to give up power to let a woman assume a role, and there's still resistance to that from time to time. I didn't run into that, but I see it happen all the time.
Well, I feel like a little bit along those lines too, just in the last year and in the past generations, we've lived through so many firsts historically. So did you maybe aspire to be the first? I know you said it kind of happened naturally as a result of you being more and more involved with the club, but sometimes I feel like with role models, in order to be it, you kind of have to see it, and you didn't have that in your experience. So kind of what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to a friend last night about that phrase, you can't be what you can't see. And I said, anyone who's a first had to figure out how to be something they couldn't see. And so if we say you can't be what you can't see, then we'll never advance. I guess I would just see something that was of interest to me, and I would think I'll apply myself to whatever that might be. I know in Virginia, I was the first woman president of the Young Lawyers group. Now, I didn't set out to do that, but over time, I think if you find an organization that you want to make a difference to, and you think, well, why should there be a limit on what I do? And maybe I'm a bit, I guess, more cautious. I think, well, you prove yourself that you can do the job, and then they can't stop you after that. And it's been mostly, as I said, with law and sport, they've been sort of male-dominated industries. But I do think that a critical mass of women means that you aren't the only one, and that people can see that different styles, not, as we know, one woman doesn't speak for all women, and we're not all the same. And sometimes it was thought, well, if the first didn't succeed for whatever reason, well, we tried women and nobody else will get a chance. And so that's one of the things that I have felt from time to time, that, when you're the only woman, that you're speaking for all the women in the world, and how you are accepted and how you react means somebody else does or doesn't get a chance. And I'd like to think we've moved beyond that, but often we find out we haven't. And I've heard they have said to me, "Oh, we tried a woman and that didn't work out, and so we're going to get a man next time." And you'd think that closed-minded way of thinking means that they'll fall by the wayside over time, because that's not the best decision-making model, and it's denying access to half the talent. And as we know, if it was based on merit, women would be half the jobs by now. So I do hear that, but I think that when you find something that matters to you, and you really want to make a contribution, then you go above and beyond, and you become what you've never seen before.
I love that, because I always did wonder if you did feel pressure initially to kind of speak on behalf of all women. So, I mean, I guess you kind of spoke to that. Can I ask what maybe the best advice you've ever been given was? I'm just curious.
Best advice. I guess there are a couple of things I think about. One that I like it wasn't given to me, but it's something I think about a lot. It's an Oscar Wilde quote about, you might as well be yourself because everyone else is taken. And the idea that, and I guess that goes to what's now, called authenticity, and it's to know yourself really well. And then you don't get pushed from side to side or try to please people, or you understand yourself and what you can contribute. So I do think often about knowing yourself. And then I look back to some advice I was given as a 16-year-old, I guess. And it was true advice. And it was my Girl Scout leader in Grundy, Virginia, way up in the mountains. And I was thinking about what to do at university, because I was my first person in my family to go. And I was thinking about what would I do, because what I really liked was just reading history and reading English. And I thought, there's not too many things happening. And I remember my Girl Scout leader said, you ought to think about getting a profession, because you can always take care of yourself. And I thought, wow. Self-sufficiency, that's really important to me. I didn't know how important it was. And I didn't sort of set out on a mission then. But over time, as I was making choices, I kept thinking, well, if I get a credential, I can always find a job. And I always saw myself as sort of making my way in something or the other. So I found the law, where you get to read and write for a living. And get to help people solve problems. And I wasn't sure that after law school, that I liked the law too much, but I really liked client work. I wasn't crazy about law school, but when clients came into it and there were real situations and real people, I thought, I think I found the right thing here. I think this is me.
Well, I have to ask a little bit more about your presidency. What is something unexpected about being president that most people probably wouldn't know?
Well, there's still a perception that the president sort of runs things, and that isn't the case. The president, depending on how different clubs are set up differently, but they basically have a constitution there. And back in the amateur days, there was one role called the president. Nobody contemplated you'd have your chief executive officer, and you'd have this management team that got things done. So like our constitution says, well, the board runs everything. And right away we thought, no, we've set up, proper delegations. The board reserves itself for these things. The management team and the CEO. The CEO is the single point of accountability, so that we know how things are going and we can ask him, and that's his job to make sure that he carries out our instructions. So I think there's still this idea. And when I first became president, there was a lot of sort of things in the press about, well, what does she know about football? And it was like, well, I'm just a fan. But presumption was, if you hadn't played, then you couldn't understand how difficult it was going to be. And I thought, oh, really? That's an old-fashioned notion. That's not the way that we've operated in a very long time. And so the fact is, I sort of chair the board and act as a liaison with the CEO, and he and I talk pretty much every day. And we sort of meet up regularly, and if he has something he wants to run by me, he'll give me a call. So I think people, sort of assume the president has these overarching powers, and they're just a member of the board like anyone else. And the board's a committee, and there's one decision. It's a committee decision. And so that's the way that we operate. I think that people might not know how much sort of ambassadorial work you're called on to do, which I quite enjoy, meeting supporter groups and speaking on behalf of the club at various things. There's meetings, at least 3 a year, with the AFL Commission, and you go on behalf of the club and listen to what they have to say. And I'm on the competition committee, which sort of styles what's the changes that are going to happen to the rules. And so there's a lot of that behind the scenes work that goes on. And this is still a voluntary job, so it's not as if, but at the same time, I find that to be quite rewarding and fun to meet people from other clubs and hear what they're doing. So I think that people are sort of surprised that, one, you don't get paid. Second, you do a lot of extra work. And then the third is how much fun it is. 95% of it's fun and 5% is just terror. Things go wrong, and you just got to accept that they're going to go wrong. And your job is to work your way through it with the management team and come up with a good solution and make a good decision.
Well, I don't mean to lean into the terror, but I wanted to talk a little bit about last season because it was such a singular season. So what maybe was the most challenging part about being president during a pandemic?
Yeah, there were lots of, the whole league was just trying to find a way to restore games and to play. We, of course, I think the toughest thing was trying to figure out how we were going to go financially. And the really hard part was to have to stand down staff and to determine who that might be. Another difficult thing was hubs. I didn't go to the hubs because I had no operational role. But instead of being able to sit around a table and talk to one another, like the board couldn't meet in person either. And you start to realize you get a lot out of just being in a room with people and reading them a whole lot better. So I think that toward the end, when we were able to get together in November for a meeting, we realized how much we'd missed one another. But I do find it's generally easier to solve problems or to talk things through if you're in the same room. But we did it just like this, with cameras, and some people were in a room in Queensland and some people were in their various homes down here. But I think that the financial implications, the sort of really sad way that we had to deal with staff through no fault of their own, it was the same all over the world, that people lost jobs just because there was no job there anymore. And then personally, I really miss not being on the ground after we won the grand final.
Right.
That's a pretty magic thing to see, to look around and see all the people that have worked so hard. But no, the pandemic threw up issues for every household, every sporting code. And we were very fortunate that we didn't lose any lives in the Richmond sort of family here. And as we've slowly started return to something that looks like normal, we've been able to hire back some people.
That's really great to hear because, as you said, it did affect not just the club, but the entire league, and a lot of people all over the world were touched by it. COVID is still around. The vaccine has only just started its rollout, I think, in Australia. So I think it might take some time. Do you still think it's going to be a threat to this season? Do you think the season will look like last year?
I think we have to be ready for it to change at a moment's notice. I think the women's seasons showed that. We haven't, as far as I can remember, in the games we've played so far, they haven't been against the opponent that was originally announced, and hasn't been on the day that was originally announced. So you think, who we're playing and where is it going to be and what time is it going to be? And for example, I've announced our game for next week, and it's on Friday at 5:00. Well, I thought it was going to be Saturday at 7. And the men are playing their practice match on Friday at 7 in another location. So you think, well, how can I cover both of them? I'll find out some way to get to the two of them. So I do think that the season, we hope, is a bit more predictable. And we would love to think that crowds in Victoria can come back. But I think you just have to be ready for anything to happen. And as you said, the vaccine has just started its rollout here among health workers and quarantine workers. And we don't have community transmission in the same way as in the States. So that's a bit different. But New Zealand last night went into lockdown for a week, and they haven't had any with one case in Auckland. So I think that people are quite careful that once it spreads here, it's going to be really hard to contain. I think people have generally bought into that's what we need to do, and hopefully with the vaccine and great contact tracing now that we can keep it under control. But it'll be a challenge, and we'll just have to remain ready. I do think we'll get more games played this year than the 17 from last year, 18 plus finals. So that would be good. But I think we'll just do whatever is required, whether it's without crowds, whether it's moving somewhere else to get the season played, and the women's as well.
I agree. Just kind of keeping an open mind, really, I think is all that you can do. Speaking of AFLW, though, there's been spectacular growth in the AFLW since it started in 2017. So where do you see growth in that side, or where do you maybe see the AFLW game and team in like 5 to 10 years?
Well, I would hope that in 5 years that every AFL men's club has a women's team. I just think there's no reason to slow that down, because as we've seen, the more opportunities that are there for women, it sort of, in my opinion, fast tracks the development of the game for women at a professional level. Just in the year and a bit, the 11 games we've played now, we don't look like the side from last year. It's because of the experience, and also the young women who are being drafted have played Australian rules football as juniors now. It's not as if we have just people who are switching from another sport to this, because there was that great gap where girls and women couldn't play, and so they went to other sports. And now you can continue to play from your junior years all the way through, and we're seeing the skills are just so much better, and having access to elite facilities and coaching, is the women come along really well. So I can just see it becoming more and more popular, and people realizing that it's not meant to be a duplicate of the men's game. It's meant to be its own game, and there are some wonderful athletes out there. And so if you think of it that way, I think it'll just be more and more interest, and people I think I would have thought would never have been great fans of women's football talk about it all the time. They really like seeing the development. I think you feel like you're on the ground floor of something being built, and the clubs that have been in the competition longer have a bit of an advantage. But I think in the next 5 years there'll be a lot of catch up, and I'd love to see all 18 clubs have a women's team.
I would love to see that too, personally. And I think really just kind of the reach will be limitless, hopefully, during that time. Mm-hmm. Well, to kind of switch gears here, there have been incidences of racism in the AFL that have kind of come to light in recent years. At the same time, I know Richmond has had the Corin Gamagee Institute since 2011, kind of providing positive examples and education in that space. Can you talk more about what the Institute does?
Yes, the Corin Gamagee Institute, and the Corin Gamagee means grow and emerge in the local Wurundjeri language, and that's where that comes from. That organization is for developing leadership in young Indigenous leaders, ages sort of 14 to 17, and they can go on and also get certificates in various subjects, and then go on to university placement at Swinburne University, which is our naming partner for the Swinburne Center, where our ground is, our training ground. So that's where it started. There have been about 2,000 Indigenous young people who've come through there. We also have that's sort of the cornerstone and the beginning, but we've had a long association with Indigenous communities, and very proud of that. And actually now we have 22 seventh graders who go to school down at our administration building, and they're from the Northern Territory. It's called the Melbourne Indigenous Transition School. It's 11 boys and 11 girls, and a lot of them are scholarship holders to private schools in Melbourne, and this is a year for them to live in a dormitory very near my house, actually. And they walk from my neighborhood down to school at the Richmond Football Club every day. And last year in COVID, they moved to Darwin, which is way up north and had no cases. And most of them are from that part of the world. So there was a school set up there so that they could continue. But it's a way of getting acclimated to life in a big city and to making some friends and having some friends that when you go to your various schools. So that's been important. We were asked by Victoria has a treaty commissioner to work on treaties with Indigenous communities in Victoria. It's the only state in the country. And we were asked by them to promote the treaty enlistment. Indigenous people are the only ones allowed to vote for an assembly that then would go and negotiate the treaties. And so in 2019, it was our Dreamtime game, and we wore a treaty on our jumpers. And they've come back to us now and asked us to promote it again, which we will do for the Dreamtime game this year. So all of those things I think are meaningful, and it sort of becomes, you hope, part of that, who you are. And it's not a moment of tokenism or we'll dip a toe in the water and see how it goes. It's been, the Corn Gamage Institute will be 10 years old, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And if we had more space, we could do more courses. The demand is quite great. And we're looking at redeveloping our administration building and our training ground. And a big part of it will be a new wing for more Corn Gamage courses, and also Bashar Hooley, who's one of our great footballers, who has an Islamic academy for boys and girls to play football. And his foundation, when he finishes playing, which we hope isn't too soon, but you have to be realistic, is going to be housed at that at our training ground as well. So we just think that makes us better. It just makes us better to have different kinds of people around and to just be a normal part of the place. And our players also took great interest, and it was a player-driven thing, in Black Lives Matter. And they said, we want to take the knee, and they wore black T-shirts in warm-ups for the whole season. They said it's not a one-time thing. We want to be behind this for the foreseeable future. And that wasn't driven by the management or the board. It was the players saying it means something to us, which I think shows that they feel they can express what's important to them. So I could go on forever. I'm very proud. I'm very proud of what they do. Yeah.
I'm really just so grateful for that diversity and just having that structure in place as a support system, really, now and in future. I think that that's so important. So it kind of made me emotional when I was listening.
Well, we found that lots of times, and we weren't always our best in the past, but helping, employees from different backgrounds settle in is the more people that you have from those different backgrounds, they can tell you what it takes. And so I find that lots of decisions get made in the right way because someone will say, I'll tell you, this is what's important to us and this is what we want to do. And we go, well, great. We wouldn't have known that had you not been here to help us. So I think all of this is just, like I said, makes us a better place.
And it kind of just grows everything in like a direction that I just really hope that American sports will kind of follow too. So, well, I just have one final question for you. And, aside from the premierships, which are enormous achievements for the club, I mean, what are some of the biggest successes and milestones, the club has achieved during your time as president?
Well, we were the first club and still the only one with over 100,000 members. And we were making record memberships even before we started winning premierships. We had 7 straight years of increase and record membership, and we hadn't won anything, which I think shows that the communications to fans made them feel part of something happening. And I have said several times that while you're waiting to win, you got to make people proud about what you're doing. And so the things that we do in the community, and we've worked with Alana Madeline Foundation against bullying for children and e-safety and all those sorts of things, that some people sign up. We have a membership called the Alana Madeline, and we play around for them. And there's 2 young girls who were killed in gun violence 25 years ago now. And we have a membership that if you sign up to go to that round, all the money goes to that foundation. And 5% of our profits from our merchandise all go to the Alana Madeline Foundation. So anyway, that's a way of saying that we were doing something that made people want to be part of us, and that the silverware was important, but it was almost secondary because there was no return except to feel good about what the club was doing. That was important. And it sounds boring, but what was really important is we had to share our training ground with cricket. And here in Australia, there's usually put a big cricket pitch in the middle of the ground, and it's played in the summer, which meant we had no ground to train on. So when we were finally, and our CEO and CFO spent a couple of years negotiating this, we finally found a home for cricket, a big new home in another place, and got our own ground and turned over all the dirt and reshaped it. And I said, just seeing that new dirt was a highlight, because without that, we wouldn't have had our own training ground. We wouldn't have had our second side. We wouldn't have had our women's side. So that was really just fundamental to us being able to move forward. So that made me feel that was an important thing that we did. And like you said, premierships are pretty fantastic, but I think just trying to live what we say. Our purpose is connecting to thrive and win, and connection's a big thing, whether it's with our fans or each other. And our team say all the time about connection. And we spend a lot of time thinking about what our purpose is. And I think, once you know your purpose, you really can just get on with business, and we reinforce it all the time. And the connection, we think, leads to thriving, and that's thriving as individuals. And then if you've connected and you're thriving, then the winning takes care of itself. So that's why winning is the last thing. And it's like winning financially, winning on the ground. But anyway, so we talk a lot about connecting to thrive and win. And it's a unique place when everybody knows what our purpose is. And I think that's what drives a lot of wonderful results we've seen lately.
I honestly love to hear. And I know we'll all be watching how Richmond does this year. I know Richmond will be a big part of viewing for everyone as you go for the 4th premiership in 5 years, which would put you right up there with some of the best teams, I think, ever in the game. But thank you so much for doing this, Peggy. It was such an honor to speak to you and to talk to you about the Tigers, but also just about the game in general. So thank you so much for doing the interview.
You're welcome. Go Tigers.
Thanks for hanging, everyone. Stay safe and healthy. Check on your friends and neighbors. We'll get through this like footy. I'm virtually hugging you, and we'll talk footy soon.